I'm just about to interview an academic who lost his job for trying to tell you what even the ABC today admits is true. Because this is a story not just about how global warming is not producing the predicted disasters that the Albanese government claims as its excuse for its new global warming laws today. This is also about how telling the truth about this insane scare gets you persecuted, including by the ABC. I'm talking about news today that would have stunned anyone who takes the ABC seriously, who takes climate scientists seriously, who takes politicians and global warming activists seriously. The Great Barrier Reef that they've told you for decades is being killed by global warming actually now has record coral cover for most of its length. The Australian Institute of Marine Science says there's been a huge rise in coral cover in the northern reef and also in the central reef, and these are the parts of the reef that most tourists see. There was a small decline in the southern reef, but this wasn't because of global warming. It was largely because of the crown of thorns starfish. We can get on top of that if we just try harder. Now, this is an important moment, and I'm not surprised that papers like the Sydney Morning Herald virtually buried almost no mention of it. I was watching TV news bulletins, no mention of it, because this exposes the global warming hysterics who for decades have treated the reef as some kind of hostage, cut your emissions or the reef gets it. The Greens leader was at that game just yesterday.
The Great Barrier Reef will die, as will the 60,000 jobs that depend on it. More coal and gas mines will cause more floods, fires and droughts. They will increase the cost of living, destroy infrastructure, ecosystems will collapse, and more species will become extinct. And more of us will die.
Honestly, if these guys were right, the reef today would not have record coral cover. It would be a smoking ruin. Because how often have these people, Adam Band and the rest of them, claim the reef is dying, if not dead already? Here's just a tiny sample of this propaganda that's been going on for more than 2 decades. In 2000, for instance, Great Barrier Reef faces destruction within the next century. Fast forward to 2012, half the Great Barrier Reef will be gone in under 30 years. In 2014, Great Barrier Reef faced with irreversible damage. In 2016, the Great Barrier Reef half dead already, 93% bleached. And then next year, the reef is dying even faster than before. Last year, climate change, 99% of the reef could be wiped out by 2025. And this year, how the Great Barrier Reef is dying and why you should care. In fact, every Labor Prime Minister this century and every Greens leader, they've used this same scare, this same threat. They've said that global warming is killing the reef or could soon destroy it. Just about every global warming preacher also warns our reef is dying. Here's David Attenborough.
Half the reef's corals have already died. We're heading for a future in which the Great Barrier Reef is a coral graveyard.
US President Barack Obama even flew here and used the reef in a speech to try to shame Prime Minister Tony Abbott into doing more about global warming.
The incredible natural glory of the Great Barrier Reef is threatened.
And the ABC, probably more than any other media organisation, pushed this doom-mongering relentlessly.
Scientists say the Great Barrier Reef was forever changed by a catastrophic marine heatwave in 2016.
The ABC was relentless. It kept promoting the scientists with the scariest claims, and our top global warming preachers, of course, would back them up.
Terry Hughes and his team rated a staggering 95% of the reefs they flew over in the most severely bleached categories.
You know, this is one of the greatest environmental catastrophes that our country has ever seen, and yet somehow it's fallen off the political agenda.
Yes, that was our friend Tim Flannery again. Now, if you try to warn against these ridiculous claims, the ABC would mock you and punish you and treat you like a leper, even if you were a scientist or even a dean of science like Professor Peter Ridd, who warned that these scares about the reef were exaggerated.
And an incredulous Andrew Bolt took up the tune.
Now, global warming, it's not simply grotesquely exaggerated.
The world's coral experts, here and overseas, agree the risk is real. And indeed, they have been sounding the alarm for years. Yet, for the last 3 weeks, News Corp columnists have relentlessly pushed the government line and typically ignored the plight of the reef or denied it. On the Bolt Report on Sky, for example, and in The Australian, News Corp's coral contrarian Dr Peter Ridd assured us the reef is fine.
The ABC's Media Watch and the science establishment kept going, not just for me, but for Professor Ridd in particular. It was so ugly and so relentless.
Peter Ridd is the poster boy for people who don't accept that man-made global warming has put the reef in danger. So it was remarkable that he's been singled out by a group of top reef scientists in a blunt letter to Environment Minister Susan Lee, advising her quite simply not to believe his claims.
Great Barrier Reef expert panel says Peter Ridd misrepresenting science. Panel head Ian Chubb compares roadshow of Dr Ridd to tobacco industry strategy defending smoking.
I do hope that that panel apologises to Peter Ridd. But in the end, they got him. He was sacked by James Cook University for saying this on Sky News about the reef, for telling you what the reef today is saying. It is not dying. The climate experts have got it wrong.
The basic problem is that we can no longer trust the scientific organisations like the Australian Institute of Marine Science, even things like the ARC Centre of Excellence for Coral Reef Studies. A lot of this stuff is coming out, which the science is coming out not properly checked, tested or replicated. And this is a great shame because we really need to be able to trust our scientific institutions. And the fact is I do not think we can anymore.
What kind of country is this, where Peter Ridd lost his job for saying that, for telling the truth about the reef, while the ABC and climate scientists and politicians and activists, they get away with 2 decades of feeding you such fake scares?